Welcome back, Team DWC. It's your boy TWP Popcorn. Y'all know what time it is. 6 p.m. Wednesday, 10 a.m. Saturday and Sunday. Look out for the shorties, because they be everywhere. We got some bullshit cracking out today. Is it past 7 seconds? I guess it's past 7 seconds. But who cares? Intro done. Let's get straight to bed.
Mr. Nice Guy was blowing up, man. We got customers from all over New York.
No, not that.
We even stole a few from Samson.
Oh, what's up, nigga? Come on in, man. Come on, man. Thanks, baby. Get on, beat it, don't get you scared.
Yeah. So smoke. What can I get you today, Smoke a Lot?
Love weed. Let me get a pound of your Swedish chiba.
Damn. Yes, some told me to bring a lot of weed, man. Oh, shit. Pound of my Swedish Chiba. Don't get no better than that.
Smells you the bag, baby.
That's gonna be $9,600, bro.
See what I got here. Come on, man. Hang out for a minute and smoke with me. I got weed, got my bong out. Come on, son.
For you, man, I'll stay for a minute, but then I gotta be going.
I understand.
Man, Smoke a Lot opened up to me like I was Barbara Rogers. It was ridiculous. He told me about his lawyer,
He had sex with my mama. Why?
his spirituality,
God, if you listen, hell.
his bad back,
Doctor said I need a backiotomy.
his love life.
I'm impotent, man. Get away from me, bitch.
I mean, talk about a guy with problems.
Tough break.
I can't take it no more.
No wonder he smoked a pound a week.
Somebody want it.
So now we had a
Real
famous
nigga boy.
clientele, and
Green eyes gonna miss you.
guess what
You
else?
call me next week.
About weed.
Did you know that since potatoes and tomatoes are in the same family, that you can merge them together with grafting to create one plant that produces potatoes underneath the ground and tomatoes on the top? Well, today I'm going to have a go at creating one of these pomatoes or tomatoes, and I'll share with you the whole process right through to the end. And who knows, if this all works out, maybe I'll be able to make my own ketchup and fries from ingredients grown all on the same plant. So to start this project, we need a tomato plant and a potato plant, so let's get those sorted first. So here I've got some tomato seeds, and I'm sowing these into some seedling trays in early spring. After a few weeks I had a bunch of little tomato plants coming up, and I just kept them growing indoors by a sunny window while it was still a bit cold outside to plant. Once they had started to outgrow the seed trays, I potted them up so they could get a bit bigger before I planted them out in the garden when the weather was warmer. Here I've got a few seed potatoes, 2 different types, and I've left these in a bright place so they could start to sprout, and you can see the sprouts coming out there. It's late spring now, and these grow really quickly, so they should easily catch up to the tomato plants that I started a few months ago. I'm planting them pretty much as deep as I can in these small pots, using a mix of compost and potting mix, and there is a reason why I've used these small pots for now, and you'll see why in just a little bit. Alright, now that we've got the plants ready, it's time to graft them together. We do need some clean tools for this, so I'm using some methylated spirits to clean the secateurs and grafting knife. And you don't have to use a grafting knife, you can just use a Stanley knife or box cutter instead, as long as it's nice and sharp. Okay, so what we need to do is take some cuttings from the tomato plants that are about the same thickness as the stem of the potato plants. The tomatoes have gotten really bushy and need a good prune anyway, so I'm finding some suckers or side shoots that are a suitable size for the grafting. I'm now just removing most of the leaves off the cutting, because the more leaves you have, the faster the cutting will lose moisture, dry out, and potentially die. So I'm just making sure I leave the growing tip intact at the top. Okay, so with the grafting, let's cut this potato plant off at a point that matches the same thickness of our cutting, and I would recommend doing this in a shaded area away from the wind. Now we're going to slice down the middle of the stem a few centimeters deep. Now using the tomato cutting, I'm just doing a long angled cut on both sides to create a V that's about the same length as the slice that we made in the potato stem. It might take a few goes to get it to the right shape, so don't worry if you need to do multiple cuts. It definitely took me a few goes to get it right. Now we can just push the tomato plant into the potato stem, and since we have the same thickness, it should line up on both sides. But if it doesn't, just focus on making sure one side lines up really well, with the outer part of the stem staying flush. Last thing I'm doing is just wrapping it in some grafting tape to hold it tightly together, and I'm just wrapping it around nice and secure. You can also use like a grafting clip instead to hold these together, but I figured the tape should give a bit of extra protection from the graft drying out. One last thing I'm testing out is doing a whip and tongue graft to see if this works any better than the cleft graft. It's basically cutting an angled cut on both the potato and on the tomato, and then coming about a third of the way down and slicing down into the stem of both. Then you can just slide them together and the tongues should just hold them in place, ready to then wrap them up in the grafting tape. Since these potatoes have grown multiple stems, I figure I may as well just increase my chances and graft onto every stem. And I did lose track of where I planted all the different tomato varieties, so if all these grafts work, then we should end up with a plant that has several different tomato varieties all growing on the same plant, so that could be pretty cool. So the reason for planting the potatoes in small pots is so that I could easily bring them indoors into the shade while the grafts heal, which should hopefully just take around a week or so. I'm covering just one of these with a bag to increase the humidity and test out if this is something that they'll benefit from or not. But that's pretty much it, we'll see how it goes. And I thought I'd quickly mention this book here, which is a really helpful resource to have when learning to graft all sorts of things, like tomatoes, peaches, mangoes, apples, avocados, and even roses. So I'll leave a link below in case you'd like to pick up a copy for yourself. So after a day or two, all the stems were a little bit droopy like this one here, but I've just seen this morning that the rest of them are all standing up nice and straight, so that's a good sign. And one thing I have been doing is just misting the plants about twice a day. The ones under the bag are looking good too, but I have just seen that the potatoes are trying to grow back from the stems on some of them. So we'll go through and remove all of those so all the energy can just be focused on the tomatoes. Good news, the final tomato stem has stood up straight now. It might have taken a bit longer since it was just a bit bigger than the rest. For the plants under the bag, I want to start acclimatizing these now, so I'm just going to leave the bag half off. Today I'm just going to remove the bag entirely, and I've moved them somewhere with a bit more sun just to acclimatize them. I don't think I'll use the bag cover again, because turns out the other plants that didn't have the bag actually look a little bit healthier than the ones that did. So yeah, it didn't really have any benefit whatsoever. I'm curious to see how much they've come together, so I'm just going to unwrap a few of these to see how they look. Oh wow, look at that. So just after 8 days it's healed really well, but yeah, I will leave the other ones wrapped just for now to give them a bit longer to strengthen up. Alright, so here I'm using a mixture of compost and potting mix, as well as a few sheep manure pellets, and we'll mix those together. The root system on this one looks really good, and I'm just teasing them out slightly, putting them in the pot, and then making sure that I keep the grafts above the surface so the tomatoes don't put out their own roots. I'm mulching them well with straw, and then making a bamboo tower to support the plants as they grow. So that one's done, and I'll do the other one just the same. So today I'm removing all the grafting tape, and overall, even though all the grafts were successful, I would say that in the future I'll probably just do the cleft graft since it was a lot easier. In saying that, when I did this whip and tongue graft here, it was a really crappy graft, but instead of redoing it, I thought I could just use it as a test to see if it would work, and it did. So in the right conditions, it seems that tomatoes are pretty straightforward to graft successfully, even if you don't do the best job. I thought today I'd give these a bit of diluted worm tea from my worm farm, and it's awesome to see there's some flowers on the tomatoes, and even some fruit forming on some of them too. Alright guys, so we've got some of these tomatoes ripening up now. We've got these beautiful orange ones all coming on now, which is cool to see. And these plants haven't been growing really vigorously throughout their life. You can see they don't have huge amounts of leaves on them, and they're not sort of growing really tall. And I'm not too sure if that's because they're not on their own rootstock. You know, they are on a potato after all. The other thing it could be is that I've got multiple plants growing out of the one rootstock, and so maybe if I had cut off all the rest of the shoots and just grown one tomato per rootstock, maybe then it would have grown sort of taller and bushier. I'm not too sure, but I do like the look of having multiple types of tomatoes all on the one plant. I think it's really cool to have, you know, these orange ones as well as these longer ones at the back. They're a golden light tomato. And then these ones here are indigo pear drop, which is one of my favorite tomatoes. Why don't we give this a try and see what it's like? Juicy. Tastes just as good as all my other tomatoes that I have growing in my garden. Nice and sweet and juicy. You can't beat a homegrown tomato or any homegrown produce really. Definitely a success in terms of the flavour. It's really good. So I'm looking forward to the rest of these ripening up, and I'll show you definitely what these indigo pear drops look like when they're ripe. They're really beautiful tomatoes, and I'm really curious to see if there are potatoes growing under there. So it's not quite ready to find out yet, but it will be soon. As the season continued on and the fruits ripened up, I was able to continue harvesting and enjoying the different types of tomatoes. My favourite one still being the indigo pear drop tomatoes, because they're nice and firm and they've got a great balance of flavour between acidic and sweet. Plus they look really unique and have a pretty good shelf life too. So it turns out that I've got some red tomato varieties on here too, which is cool. And once all of these tomatoes are finished and the plants die back, that's when I'll be harvesting the potatoes. Well, hopefully there's some there to harvest. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so these plants died off a little while ago, so let's harvest these and see if we've got anything in here. Oh, we do have some. Oh wow, okay. So there's not heaps of big potatoes in here by any means, but I mean, we do have potatoes, which is awesome. Yeah, just not hugely big ones. Let's see if there's, oh yeah, there's a few more in there, deeper down. I think that's mostly all of them. Oh, there we go. It's a bit of a modest harvest in this one, but I'm just stoked that this has worked. So let's go and check on the other ones and see if we can harvest some more. Check it out. There we go. Beautiful golden looking potatoes. Definitely not as many on this one. So there we go, just a little bunch of potatoes on this one, but I still find it pretty amazing that these grew just from the energy that the tomato plants provided. And I had fun doing it, so that's the main thing. And I think also, you know, if you were able to mound these up like you would normally with potatoes, then you would have ended up with possibly a lot more. But you can't really mound them up so well if you've grafted a tomato on the top, because you don't want to bury the graft. But check out this graft here, it's actually still holding together. Oh man, that's tough. Oh, finally, and it didn't even rip it out of the grafting spot, it broke it above it, so that was pretty strong. So with this being my first time ever harvesting potatoes and tomatoes from the same plant, of course I have to get that final satisfaction of eating them together in one of the best food combinations out there, ketchup and fries, or as we would say in New Zealand, chips and sauce. I did freeze some of the tomatoes since they were ready before I could harvest the potatoes. Alright, time for the taste test. And this almost feels kind of wrong since this all came from the same plant, but here we go. Good crunch. That is so good. So satisfying. And that ketchup is so incredibly good. I'm definitely going to have to keep making this instead of buying it, because it's like nice and spicy, really good fresh taste, and if I could share one of these with you I totally would. But I hope you found this video interesting, and if you did you might also enjoy this video over here, so feel free to check that out. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one. So good.
The same terpenes that give your flowers that great smell can also do lots of other really cool things you might not know about. So we're going to look at the top 10 most common terps and learn exactly what they all do. Then I'll show you an extra one that a lot of people mistake for something else, but this one terpene might be the most important one. Terpenes are organic chemicals that give plants their unique aroma and are produced by almost all plants, including cannabis. Terpenes are even produced by some animals and insects too. And for me, terpenes are really the way that I pick out which bud I want, because I'm not really going by the THC percentage as much as I'm just going by the smell. And I feel like if a certain strain smells good to me, but it might not smell that good to you, then maybe that strain might work better for me than it would for you. Like maybe there's something about my internal biochemistry that makes this particular bud smell good to me, because this particular bud would work good for me, like on a medicinal.
It's time to peel back the layers and expose my secret to growing onions. But before we do that, just a quick safety message. If you're going to have onions on a slice of bread or in a roll, make sure you put them underneath the sausage. Right, with that out the road, g'day, I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and in this video I want to show you guys my 5 top tips on how to grow a ton of onions in a round raised garden bed such as this. Let's get into it. I like to grow our own onions because there's something special about a freshly harvested crispy onion. And also, we grow them without any chemicals at all, so they're organic, and I think that makes a big difference. Fresh and organic. Tip number 1, preparing the garden bed. Onions, just like most veggies, like a fertile, free draining soil. And as you know, I love growing in these raised garden beds, not just because it's easier on the back when preparing, maintaining and harvesting your crop, but it also allows for excellent drainage, which onions do enjoy, and it helps prevent them from rotting in ground, particularly in hot, humid climates. You don't want to over-fertilise the soil before planting, and I don't add any extra feed throughout growing, but I do prepare the bed with a generous covering of compost. If I don't have enough of my own, I'll buy it, and those bags pre-mixed with a little extra fertiliser are perfect. Otherwise, you can toss in a small handful of your own fertiliser or well-rotted manure such as chicken manure that has been composted down and it's not too fresh, but don't overdo it, because if you give it too much fertiliser, especially at the beginning, you're going to get a lot of green tops and not much bulb. I always like to add mulch as it reduces the weeds, especially when growing onions, because it can be tedious to weed between skinny onion plants, and weeds will compete heavily with them. Sow shallow, not too deep, and cover lightly, keeping the soil moist until sprouting starts, then water as required. Sow a generous amount of onion seeds to allow for poor germination, as you can always transplant seedlings from areas that have germinated well to areas that are sparse. In fact, in this bed, I sowed 2 types of onions, a brown and a red, but the red failed to come up. The seed was a bit old, I suspect, so I simply transplanted my excess browns to fill the void. Tip number 2, grow at the right time. Here in our subtropical climate, I like to sow our onion seeds towards the end of autumn, in fact the last month of autumn. That way I get them coming up and growing through winter, through spring, and then harvesting them at the end of spring or just into summer before the humidity hits and the summer rains hit. Onions hate humidity. It'll rot the bulbs, it'll make them go slimy, they won't grow very well, or they'll go to seed really early. So if you're living in a warmer climate, sow them through the driest part of the year. In cold climates, you've got a easier time growing onions because they quite like cooler climates. You sow them through spring or at the start of spring and grow them right into summer and harvest them at the end of summer. Tip number 3, grow the right type. Growing the right type of onion is probably more important than growing at the right time. Although these 2 points are closely related, so let me explain. I prefer to grow fast or early maturing varieties because we grow them through winter when the days are the shortest at that time of year. The growth habit of onions is largely influenced by daylight hours, and depending on the variety, they may not grow well or even fail completely if the wrong type is grown at the wrong time. For example, late maturing varieties that happen to be great keepers or last a long time in the pantry need long daylight hours, sometimes up to 15 hours per day, whereas faster growing or quicker bulbing varieties like these Hunter River Browns only need around 10 hours of sunlight. So when buying onion seeds, think about your climate and particularly the daylight hours at the time of year when you are growing them. Then match that to the type of onion. Having said that, I don't want to totally deter you from trying different types of onions, even the late maturing ones, at the wrong time of year, because I can tell you I've grown all different types of onions, the late maturing ones at the wrong time of year, and had some pretty good successes. So sometimes when the books say you can't, give it a go anyway, because you'll be surprised at what you can grow. Also, there are other ways of kind of cheating. As you may have noticed, I have a different type of onion growing in the middle here, right in the center of these brown onions. This is called an Egyptian walking onion, and it grows really well in hot climates. It's a type of bunching onion. Sure, it doesn't bulb exactly like regular onions, but they can still be used in the same way, and they taste great. Once I harvest these brown onions, and I'll do that soon in tip number 5, these Egyptian onions will eventually take over the whole bed and give us onions all the way through summer. Other easier to grow varieties such as shallots, which grow in clusters, or spring onions can be just as useful as an all-rounder for their own great flavour or as a substitute when larger bulb types are difficult to grow. Tip number 4, crowd them in. Now this might seem counterintuitive because most onion growers or experts will tell you that you should thin the onions out and spread them out so good 25 centimetres apart so that they have a chance to grow independently, get bigger bulbs, and they'll grow better like that. But that's not something that I do. Not by the book anyway. I will thin them out to an extent, or more like spread them out if I see a bunch of seedlings all grouped together, or if I need to fill gaps, as I said earlier. But in general, the only thinning out we do is early harvesting for eating as we go. Look, if you want to thin them out and grow them by the book, go for it, because that is a proven method of growing. But I didn't make this one of my top tips, crowd growing, for the sake of it. I'd made it because it does work. Crowd growing onions like this in a raised bed means you can grow more in a smaller space, it helps to suppress weeds, and it allows for earlier harvesting, as we'll discuss next. Tip number 5, when to harvest. You know, this is a really popular question about onions, and rightly so, because some people get confused. There's a few myths going around that you need to break the tops of onions or bend them over to get them ready for maturing and curing. But that's not correct at all. The truth is, or the short answer is, you can harvest onions at any time, especially when you're growing them like this, and you're naturally thinning them out as they grow. So you're harvesting these immature onions. Within a few weeks after sowing, you're starting to harvest onions, really. You know, people call it thinning out. And in a situation like this, right up until the maturing point, which is now, you are still selecting onions with the green tops, and they are just magic in cooking. So harvest them at any time. But when are they really ready and mature? You can tell. See how the tops are just naturally bending over? Some have gone to seed. So that's a telltale sign. The tops will start to die off. It's not a disease or anything, it's just the normal growing progression. Some of them will go to seed. Usually the larger ones will go to seed first. And what I like to do is leave some of them go to seed. You only need 1 or 2. And they will become the seed for next year, the next season. And the rest you just harvest. So let's do that now. And there you have it. What a fantastic harvest out of such a small sized bed. I am really wrapped. And now what I'll do is I'll place these on our homemade drying rack in the sun for about 3 to 4 days and let them die off fully and crisp up and cure, and then they'll be perfect for storage in the pantry for the long term and to use over the next several months. So those were my 5 top tips on how to grow a ton of onions in a small round raised garden bed just like this. Remember, prepare the garden bed, grow at the right time, grow the right type, crowd them in, and when to harvest. Do all those things right and you'll grow a ton of onions just like I can. If you like this video, please give it a big green thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. Unreal. Now all we need to do is cook up one of those sangers and whack the sausage on top of those onions. So we cover all those OH and S issues. See ya.
If your life is fucked up, you need weed. Weed is put on this earth for niggas on the struggle, niggas on the grind. There is a chemical in weed that's called bucket. Had to be careful though. Had to be careful because weed is getting stronger every 2 weeks. And these niggas ain't sending out memos or bulletins or nothing. The shit just strong for no reason. And these niggas that sell the weed be happy than a motherfucker to tell you how much stronger this shit is than the last shit. Just as soon as they see you, just nigga. You remember that shit I gave you last week, nigga? It's nothing, nigga. It's nothing. It's nothing, nigga. Nigga, it's nothing. This shit right here, nigga. This shit right here, nigga. Right here. This shit, nigga. This shit here, nigga. Always have some fucked up name. It's cryptochronic kind of like, nigga.
The rules of how to grow a YouTube channel have completely changed this year. And I would know, I used to work at YouTube for 5 years, then worked at Instagram for 3 years, and then I started this channel.
And I want to share 7 unconventional tips
that led me to get millions of views per day. And it's not the obvious stuff that everyone's talking about. It's stuff I don't think people have heard before.
You're very good at what you do.
I want to get into the 7 tips, but before I do, quick story from my time at YouTube. Because I had a chance to work with so many amazing creators, celebrities, brands, but there's one person, one celebrity that really stuck with me as I started this channel and made that change that catapulted my channel. And that guy was James Corden. He did something so profound that people don't give him credit for, because at the time that he started his YouTube channel and his late night show, he was relatively unknown. So much so that his security guard wouldn't even let him back in after he took a lunch break because he didn't recognize him. But today, he has a much bigger YouTube channel than most of his peers, despite starting from behind. And it's because of this thing that he told us privately that he's now since said publicly on the Howard Stern Show.
A bad show for me is one, I think, where we've just made what I consider to be a talk show. Anybody could have read those jokes, done that desk bit, asked those questions, introduced that band and said goodnight. And the ones that I love are the ones where I go, big song, huge taped bit, out, carpool, sketch, music.
Because you've said you view your show as a variety show, and I get that.
For sure.
You're not trying to do a talk show.
No.
And that brings us to our first tip, which is create content like Corden and not Colbert. Listen, there's 2 types of creators in this world. There are Colberts that have talk shows, do monologues, do desk bits, just do the same formats in their chair and don't really experiment. And then you have the Cordens. It's the people who experiment with different formats. We're going to talk about how to do that. They go outside of their studio. If you look at his channel, he has so many more formats, like Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts, Crosswalk Musical, Drop the Mic, Riff Off, Flinch, Face Your Mother. And the key here is this. If you have more format, then you have more opportunities to hook a viewer into constructing their own episode.
Because YouTube's algorithm will recommend your shorts alongside each other for them to binge.
Versus Colbert only has a monologue, the desk bit. There's just not as much variety and hooks to speak to different kinds of viewers. And that's where I want to bring this back to my channel and your channel. Because for 10 months of my first year starting this channel last year, I was getting thousands of views because I was basically a Colbert. I was a talk show creator. I was doing monologues, I was doing interviews, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the second I started putting out variety show formats I'm going to talk about here, my channel started exploding. So I asked myself, what would a variety show about my niche, the creator economy, because I want to try to educate creators with everything I've learned from the inside at these companies. But you could ask yourself what a variety show for blank looks like, whatever your niche is. But here's what it looked like for me.
Who are these 2 people?
Tom Clooney.
Tom Clooney?
Is that Logan Paul and I don't know who the other one.
One of my formats was Creators for Celebrities, which basically took a look at this whole idea of, is social media more powerful than traditional media? Creators are more popular than celebrities. So I would ask people, is Logan Paul more popular than Tom Hanks? Is Mr. Beast more popular than Tom Cruise? And the results were fascinating, both in terms of viewership, but also the answers on the street. And then it just started exploding to the point where Casey Neistat tweeted out that, like, I need his favorite TikTok in terms of comparing him and George Clooney, which is nuts to hear your favorite YouTuber say that you made his favorite TikTok. And then Graham Stephan would comment about, yeah, he's disappointed in SpongeBob because he doesn't know who Graham Stephan is when I compared him to Bill Gates. Anyways, I did other formats like creator office hours where I answer questions you guys gave me in my DMs, creator tutorials where I try to give editing tips that are more geared towards creators, and a ton of other formats that we're about to put out. But the key is that more formats equals more hooks equals more watch time. And I think too many people are being a Colbert and doing monologues and interview clips when you could be doing so much more to grow on short by taking this approach. And we're going to talk about how to come up with your format and how to film them. But if I go to the next point, which is just trust the process. Know that some of these formats will bomb, others will take off. Case in point, my Creator vs. Celebrities got tens of millions of views. My creator office hours got hundreds of thousands of views, but the creator tutorials didn't do so well. It got tens of thousands of views, so I cut it. And basically what you have to remember is that for every carpool karaoke, you're gonna have a few celebrity noses. And you're asking yourself, what celebrity noses? Well, that's a format of James Corden's that never really took off. And he has a ton of other formats like that that I saw after analyzing his channel over the years. So just know that, and just know there's AI tools coming. I'm working with TubeBuddy. I'm their head creator advisor, and they told me about this predictive analytic tool where you could literally upload videos to TubeBuddy before you show them to your audience, before you upload them on YouTube, and it'll predict the watch time. So you could get even better at this if you start doing this now and have a variety show. And that brings me to the next tip, which is perfect your first frame. I really believe this is one of the most overlooked things right now, because your first frame to your short form is as important as your thumbnail to your long form. Mark my words. What I mean by your first frame is literally what do you see at 0 seconds of your short? And does everything you see there set up expectation and tension for what you're about to watch? So in my creator versus celebrity example, I asked people, hey, who are these two people? And I had the physical printout of the creator versus celebrity, but it didn't start out that way. It took a ton of hours of iteration. I initially started out where it's just me, a microphone, and I was doing this whole long intro of like, hey guys, we're here in Hollywood asking people who's more famous, creators or celebrities. First up, we have Logan Paul versus Tom. Way too long. Then I had a shorter version, and then I just got into it, which gets me into a bonus tip, which is how can you physically show your format in the first frame, not just digitally? Here's an example of that. This guy said, I'll make an ad based on a random product and a random genre. And he put 2 bowls in front of the frame with the categories written out right there. But I think we create handwriting, things that look like they came from a person. So think about how to put that in your first frame. And you'll even see like other formats I have coming up, which is creator products, first Fortune 500 products, where we put everything in that first frame. But I'd say like, Logan actually did this better. I was seeing this short where he brought the products up into the frame. He put sugar on the table when he was comparing the sugar count. And then he wrote out different note cards to show you things about Gatorade versus Prime. Just a lot of subtle but smart things that are going to the first frame and the rest of the video that allow you to stick out versus all the people who are not even thinking about this, which is like the people who didn't think about thumbnails in 2012. Again, if you get ahead of this, I promise it's going to lead to so many more views and subscribers like it has for me. Next tip is follow the 3-in-1 rule, which is, can you film 3 shorts in 1 hour? And I know that's a lot. And I know most of us don't even have close to the budget of a James Corden, because if the credits at the end of your video look like what they do at the end of his show, they look like this. You're the producer, you're the director, you're the talent, you're doing everything. I want to show you my schedule when I filmed the creator of a celebrity format, because I would literally set a goal to simplify it as much as possible so I could repeat it 3 times in 1 hour at least, and go out, get 9 videos, which total over 48 million views. And here are 3 things that I thought about in that process of simplifying. 1, can I turn a stat into a story? This stat of creators being more popular than celebrities has been going around for ages. I think I was one of the first people to make it more emotional and visceral with this comparison. Number 2, can you make minor changes to the past, not major changes? I literally studied old formats like Jay Leno's jaywalking when he went on the street, or Jimmy Kimmel's on the street format, to come up with my twist, which led to this. And lastly, how can you have a dialogue, not a monologue, with your videos? Again, I think we're in such echo chambers now that we crave hearing what a stranger has to say, because we're not getting that in our daily life. So by me going on the street, you going on the street, you talking to strangers about something related to your niche, I think you strive and get towards that dialogue, not the monologue. And that brings us to our next tip, which is simplify your speech. Especially in short form, you want to make sure that your speech, your talking has no speed bumps, because stats show that over 50% of adults prefer to read at an 8th grade level, right? They like to keep it simple, but that doesn't mean you have to dumb it down. So check out this app. It's called HemingwayApp.com. It's absolutely free. You could literally copy and paste a script, bullet points, whatever you're going to use for your video, and he'll color code and tell you what grade level it's at. Like, here's a script I took from Investopedia explaining what an NFT is, and you could just see how bad it is. Like, there's red lines everywhere. It's grade 14, and I simplified it to this: grade 8, no red or yellow lines. And if you're wondering how did I get from point A to point B, just remember the 3 C's when it comes to this tip. Be clear, be confident, be concise. When it comes to being clear in your writing, get rid of all words that sound like competencies. Say skills instead. Don't say optimize, say perfect. I really believe that bad writers hide behind big words, and bad creators by an extension of that. Big words are just meant to make you feel important and smart in most cases, not all cases. And I think most times you want to think about how can you make your audience feel smart. And another way to do that is just being confident. I think a lot of times, you could say, I think, possibly, maybe in the context of brainstorming, but when you're trying to be an authority on something and teach somebody something, it just undermines what you're bringing to the table. So be confident, get rid of those words. And lastly, be concise, make it digestible. Make your paragraphs as you talk no more than 4 sentences. Make your sentences no more than 25 words, have pauses, and then also no double descriptions. For the love of God, you don't need to say that the room was clean and tidy. The room was clean. move on. We get the point. And that brings us to our next point, which is marry your niche while you're varying your format. Look, I'm all for doing different experiments, but one thing you should always stay focused on is your niche, because if you have too much variety in a variety show, you don't really have a show or a focus. To me, I wanted to have a creator economy variety show, so people could go from watching the creator versus celebrity comparison to a creator office hour, to a creator interview clip, to a creator story. Or if you're a business channel like my buddy Alex, you could go from watching his short form Shark Tank to his business tips, to his business interviews. Or a cooking channel, you could go from a recipe to a kitchen tour, to a travel vlog. But if you have too much variety and you go from like a real estate tour to a creator economy bit to a business bit, it just doesn't make any sense. And you're going to lose your audience. You're going to lose those hooks. You're going to lose those opportunities for people to construct watch time journeys by making an episode, because it doesn't really have flow to it. And by the way, you're probably going to be losing a lot of brand deal opportunities that you didn't even know you had, because brands want to partner with creators who have niche and targeted audience. And by marrying a niche, you're able to get a lot more money. I mean, that's what I was able to do. I was able to get partnerships with brands, even though I was a smaller channel. TubeBuddy, Stir, Fiverr, they all wanted to reach the creators that I was trying to reach with my content. And then I'll say this, you got to start now. This window will not last long, because what James Corden did in 2014 when YouTube was starting out, you can now do on steroids with YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Reels. And most people don't know this terminology. Heck, I feel like I made most of it up because I wanted to try to share what I was doing differently from month 10 to month 11 and 12 and getting those millions of views. Focusing on the first frame, thinking about the 3-in-1 rule, all of this stuff. And if you're thinking you can't do this, believe me, I thought this as well, but I am just the kid of immigrants. And how am I bootstrapping this channel to get more views than some top creators, get more views than some media networks, and almost even surpass James Corden himself is beyond me. But I think it's just because I'm applying these tactics during the right time. And I think you could do the same. And if you think it's too crowded or it's too late, it's not. James Corden got his start when he was unknown and he was battling 4 other white dudes. So if he could do that, you could do this. And then once you have that audience, you can move them towards long form like I'm doing now. You can move into your podcast like I just started, and to your products and courses. So subscribe and ring that notification bell. I got so much more I want to talk about now that I'm on the outside, but still have all the knowledge from my time inside YouTube and Instagram and being a creator. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next episode.
Because this particular bud would work good for me, like on a medicinal level. There are around 150 terpenes found in cannabis, and they interact with other cannabinoids in the plant to create the entourage effect, which enhances the plant's medicinal properties. Terpenes have therapeutic properties and can aid in the absorption of cannabinoids into the bloodstream. Different terpenes have different effects, and they can influence neurotransmitters in our brain, leading to different effects on our mood. Research on terpenes found in cannabis has become an important subject of scientific research in the recent years, with some terpenes found to have therapeutic properties in treating pain, inflammation, depression, anxiety, and a few other conditions too. Besides the main terpenes or the monoterpenes that are present in large amounts, cannabis also contains lots of other sequestraterpenes, diterpenes, and triterpenes. And there can be over 100 different terps in one single plant. But
hey guys, I'm here in my recycled window greenhouse. I do another video on this if you're interested, but today I really would like to talk about fungus gnats. About 5 years ago, I did another video on a solution that I found for the fungus gnats, and I'm so happy to report to you that it's been 5 years completely fungus gnat free, 100% working. And right before I get into it, I do want to assure you that I have tried so many things. I know we've heard about a lot of solutions out there. Just to name a few: yellow sticky traps, sand mulch, gravel mulch, taping the soil, hydrogen peroxide, cinnamon, coffee, essential oils, diatomaceous earth, antifungal herb teas to drench the soil with, BT, hot pepper spray, steel wool and copper wool to like top dress, that soil with so they can't get out, forced drought, not enough water, vinegar traps, yeast traps, I think I used the heat of a blow dryer once to try to kill them in the first few inches of soil, and even neem oil itself. And some of these things really helped, but none of them eradicated the gnats at all. Nothing was totally successful. In fact, most of those things on the list were just really an absolute joke. But hey, you gotta try something once, right? So today, I'm gonna tell you the absolute solution that I've found, and that is simply neem cake. This comes in a couple different like forms. You know, some things look a little bit more like pellets. Some orders look a little bit more ground up, but either one should work. And the beautiful thing about neem cake is what you're going to do is make a neem tea with it. So you pretty much steep it in water and use that water to drench the soil of your plants, because that is where the gnats live, that's where they breed, and that's where their eggs and larvae are. And it just works to kill them off, as well as the adults. With neem oil, it is pretty effective, but the problem with neem oil is that it's really harsh. You have to emulsify it first in water using some dish soap and stuff like that. And between the oil and whatever the emulsifier is, it's going to be a little bit rough on your soil, your microbes, your plant roots. You know, things really need to breathe down there, and soil structure is really important. That's why this stuff is amazing. And not only is it not harmful for your soil and plants, it's actually beneficial for your plants. It's actually a mild fertilizer, and it's really good for your root systems. So amazing stuff. You're going to get neem cake. Find it online. It's usually found online. Unfortunately, it's not usually found in local nurseries yet, that I know of at least. But order this stuff and simply just use about 2 to 3 heaping tablespoons per 1 gallon of water. And that's really it. So what I'll do is kind of take an old bottle like this, take a little funnel, and then scoop it up like this 3 times. Okay? And then just kind of swish it in there. You kind of turn it upside down and really get it in there, because what you want is a nice brown water. But first, we need to let this sit for at least a few hours. Like a few hours is really good, maybe several hours, maybe overnight. Word of warning though, I would not go much more than that. I would not have this in here for days, because when it starts to rot, it smells really disgusting, like really bad. And with that said, I mean, some people don't like the smell of neem even to begin with. It does smell a little bit kind of like a rancid oil or like a rotten peanut butter a little bit, but honestly, it's so worth it. I mean, if you have the issue that I've had with fungus gnats that were absolutely all over my house, infesting everything, yeah, it's worth it. So try that. Couple hours, brown the water with it, shake it up, and go ahead and water your plants in the same routine that you would usually water them. One little piece of advice is just make sure that when you water them, do it in such a way that it's going to make the most contact with the most soil, especially around the surface, a few inches as possible. So maybe flood it in there fast so that it like really covers everything and then drenches down. Or if you don't have that kind of effect in your soil, do the opposite, where you go real slow and really just try to get thoroughly the entire surface of the soil. So that's really it. Whenever you usually water your plants, do it with the neem, and within several waterings, the gnats should be completely gone. Of course, there are different factors, so it's going to take a certain amount of time for one versus the other, but I could almost guarantee you guys, like in time, it will kill them, because it messes them up on a hormonal level where they just don't eat properly and they don't breed properly. It's not just going to drop them all dead right away. But it's beautiful knowing that they are experiencing a slow and tricky and strange death to their entire population. So I hope you give this a shot, and I hope that it works just as well for you as it did for me, but I'd seriously be shocked if it didn't. It's really been that effective. And if you want other solutions, other things like this, feel free to subscribe, and until next time.
Ghana has granted citizenship to several African Americans and Afro-Caribbeans as part of the Country Beyond the Return initiative to attract resettlement of Africa descendants. In 2019, Ghana successfully hosted the Year of Return with raft of activities at home and abroad to encourage the descendants of those who were forcibly sent into slavery to return home to Africa. Ghana has become a repatriation hotspot for many Black Americans over the last few years, since the country hosts, among others, the many castles and forts which were used in the slave trade. Ghana was used as a slave trade hub during the transatlantic slave trade. The Portuguese built the first permanent slave trading post to Elmina on the Gold Coast, now Ghana. This eventually passed through Dutch and English hands, and by the 18th century was handling 30,000 slaves each year. According to documented history, between 1650 and 1900, 10.2 million enslaved Africans arrived in the Americas from the 8 regions in Africa used for the slave trade. About 80% of the Africans who were enslaved and transported in the transatlantic slave trade went through the many castles and forts which can be found in Ghana.
To signal our collective determination that never again will the African peoples allow themselves to be captured and sold into slavery as commodities in foreign unknown lands to help build their wealth from whose enjoyment they were largely excluded. It would provide a bridge for the reunification of the global African family, to construct a new future of progress and prosperity for the Black peoples of the world. And would also put the spotlight on Ghana's Pan-African credentials, showcasing Ghana's vision of bringing unity and dignity back to the process of social and economic development in Africa and in the African diaspora.
For some, Ghana is a destination where worries about safety and racism are non-existent. For others, Ghana is a place where expatriates feel they can effortlessly thrive while connecting with their ancestral roots. Ghana is the only African country which grants free residential permit to any Black person born outside Africa to live in the country as long as they want, through their right of abode law. Upon living in Ghana for some few years, citizenship are automatically granted. Here are some of the statements of African Americans whose African citizenship were restored to them.
Now it's gonna turn up, oh. Oh yeah, now I can do a lot more. I really want to get into a lot of things like real estate. I want to do, business, a lot of business. I want to do entertainment still. I want to travel across West Africa on my new Ghanaian passport. Hey, Charlie, no more visa.
I'm so pleased to have finally received my citizenship today. The first visit to Ghana was in 1970 when I was a much younger person, and I've always felt at home here in Ghana. I now have a home here, and we built a house about 10 years ago, and we're spending time here and look forward to being productive.
Grantee for citizenship. And actually, the way I'm dressed now, I wanted to let the government of Ghana know how much we're appreciative of everything that they're doing for us. But 2 weeks ago, I was in Stu as in Koso Ohene, and more so. So my new name is Nana Akwesi Dentra. And I just wanted to show that we love Ghana and that we are continuing to invest and engage in everything that we're doing in the country.
Oh, I'm very excited. It's a very, what should I say? Just an exciting day for us. Many of us have been waiting for this for a long time. Like me, I've been living in Ghana 20 years. I've been married to my husband 43 years. So, the people, the country itself, everybody here is so welcoming. That's the thing. It's a very pleasant place to live. The people are pleasant. The environment is pleasant, and we feel free here.
I always want to come here to meet and greet and help my brothers and sisters, always. And I just happen to be Ghana. I'm glad I came to Ghana. It's a wonderful country. Such wonderful, warm people.
Excellent. I feel great. It's been a long time coming. I'm very happy. I feel fulfilled. And I feel like it's really a dream come true for me. My life is unfolding beautifully in Ghana. And I'm happy to finally get Ghana citizenship. It's a really big deal.
It is an honor for me, on behalf of His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, to welcome you all to this memorable occasion on the swearing-in of our brothers and sisters of the African American and Caribbean diaspora community as Ghanaians. I'll add again. The Ministry of the Interior, after a careful scrutiny of the applications of 126 members of the diaspora community, recommended the grant of Ghanaian citizenship by His Excellency the President to our brothers and sisters. He granted it, and therefore we are here today. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, following the illustrious tradition of our first president, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, George Padmore, and particularly that of Dr. Y.E.B. Du Bois, Pan-Africanism has remained both the cornerstone and the unique cliche of Ghana's foreign policy. This tradition, His Excellency the President has rekindled and demonstrated by the establishment of the Diaspora Affairs Directorate under the office of the President. He wants them under him, under his eagle eyes. And what a team we have, led by Brother Ababio. The Year of Return program in 2019 was further to demonstrate government's commitment to this. In a related development, the beyond the return activities currently being pursued by the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture is a further step in the right direction. I am glad to state that you are our own people who have chosen to return home and make Ghana your preferred home. You are welcome and you are assured of our hospitality, Akwaba.
I think it is a spiritual healing for those who are receiving this citizenship. As you know, some years ago, they were forced into migration when they didn't have any choice. And for those who went away to the plantation farms several years ago, even though it's about more than 400 years, those who have found the descendants who have found their way back to Ghana are looking for that spiritual healing, are looking for not just the citizenship that we have given them, by restoration. We are restoring citizenship for them. So when a person of this kind is getting a citizenship, it is not the same as Ghana giving citizenship to a Lebanese, to an Indian, to an American, to a white, a Caucasian, or a British guy. This is a different sort of ceremony, which is why the Interior Ministry and the Diaspora Affairs Office finds it necessary to organize something special, and on occasion like this, give the citizenship back to them. So it is a restoration of the citizenship that they have lost.